There comes a point in every journey, whether you're an actor stepping into a role, a student facing an exam, a parent trying to hold it all together, or just a human being trying to figure life out, when you realize that no matter how much you plan, strategize, or hustle, you don't have complete control. And that realization, it can be terrifying, but also strangely freeing. I used to believe that control meant power, that if I could manage every detail of my life, every opportunity, every decision, I'd be safe from failure or disappointment. I thought hard work and ambition were enough to steer the course, and don't get me wrong, those qualities do matter. They've shaped so much of who I am, but there was a moment and several since where everything I tried to control unraveled anyway. And in those moments when my own strength fell short, I learned what it truly means to trust. Trust is not weakness. It's not passively waiting for things to happen. It's the most courageous decision you can make, especially when the outcome is out of your hands. It's choosing to believe in something greater than yourself, to believe that even when you don't have the full picture, there's a purpose unfolding. Trust is about letting go, not of your dreams, but of your fear. Letting go of the need to micromanage life, and instead choosing to walk in faith. For me, this lesson didn't come from a single defining event, but from a series of them. Times when I lost roles I desperately wanted. Times when people doubted me, when the path I had so carefully laid out suddenly vanished. I would cry, question everything, and wonder what went wrong. But somehow, every no led to a better yes. Every closed door pointed me to one I wouldn't have found otherwise. And in hindsight, those detours were divine. I remember once, in the early days of my career, I faced a massive setback, something I had no control over, no way to fix, and I felt helpless. But instead of spiraling, I did something unusual for me. I paused. I breathed, I prayed, I said, "Okay, God, I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to trust that this is part of something bigger." That moment changed me, because something shifted in my spirit. A calmness took over that no human plan could have created. That's when I realized that trust isn't the absence of uncertainty. It's the decision to keep walking despite it. And once you stop trying to control every twist and turn, you actually start to live more fully. You begin to notice the signs, the people, the whispers of guidance that were always there, but drowned out by your own noise. And it's not just about big life moments. It's in the everyday, when you're stuck in traffic and running late. When your planner falls apart, when someone lets you down, each moment is a chance to say, "I release this. I trust that what's meant for me won't miss me." The irony is, once you give up the illusion of control, you gain something far more powerful, peace. You start to move with more grace. You begin to see that life isn't happening to you. It's happening for you. So if you're in a season where nothing makes sense, where your grip is slipping and your plans are crumbling, don't panic. That's not the end. That's the invitation to trust, fully, deeply, fearlessly, because that's where the real magic begins. That's where God moves, and that's where you grow. Faith isn't a destination you arrive at once and never have to visit again. It's not something you decide on a single day and then forget. Faith is a daily decision, a choice, a commitment you make over and over again, not because life is easy, but because life constantly gives you reasons to doubt, to question, to walk away from what you once believed with your whole heart. We often talk about faith like it's a singular turning point, something you find in a dramatic moment of clarity or crisis, and sure, those moments are real. Maybe it's a rock bottom experience or a life-changing opportunity that feels too perfectly timed to be coincidence. In those moments, faith feels electric, alive, obvious, but what happens after the miracle, after the feeling fades, that's where the real test begins. Because faith isn't just believing when it's easy or convenient, it's believing when there's no evidence. When there's silence, when nothing around you is changing, but you still choose to trust. There have been days in my life where I felt completely aligned, where I believed with certainty that everything was working out for my good. But there have also been days, many of them, when I've woken up full of doubt, when the prayers I whispered the night before went unanswered, when fear crept in before I even had coffee, and on those days I had to decide again. To speak faith into a space that felt heavy, to remind myself that I wasn't walking alone, even if it felt like I was. That's what makes faith powerful, not that it's constant, but that it's chosen in the face of uncertainty. Choosing faith daily means waking up and saying, I don't know what this day holds, but I trust the one who holds it. It means showing up with your whole heart even when the path isn't clear. It's about acting not out of fear, but out of conviction. And it's not always easy. Some days your faith feels strong, like an anchor. Other days it feels like a whisper you can barely hear, but both days count. Both days matter, because the strength of your faith isn't measured by how loud it is, but by your willingness to keep choosing it. In the world we live in, where certainty and control are idolized, faith is often misunderstood. People think it means being naive or blindly optimistic, but that's not true faith. Real faith is rooted in resilience. It's a quiet, grounded knowing that even when everything feels chaotic, there is still purpose, still hope, still a plan unfolding beyond what you can see. It's not about having all the answers, it's about believing even when you don't. I've learned that making the daily decision to believe doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty. You can come to God messy. You can come unsure, scared, even a little angry. He doesn't need you to be flawless. He just wants you to be real, to show up, to say, I'm here, I'm trying, help me keep believing. And He will. That's the beauty of it. Faith, when chosen consistently, becomes a lifestyle. It becomes a lens through which you see the world, not as a random series of events, but as a story being written with divine purpose. It gives you strength to face setbacks and grace to celebrate success with humility. It shapes how you love, how you forgive, how you persevere. So no, faith isn't a one-time event. It's not something you tick off a checklist and move on from. It's a decision you make when it's raining, when the sun is shining, and every ordinary moment in between. And the more you choose it, the more you'll realize, even on the hardest days, you were never walking alone. When we think of miracles, we often picture something grand, a dramatic healing, an impossible door swinging open, a breakthrough that comes like a thunderclap. We imagine fireworks, applause, maybe even a voice from the heavens declaring something profound. And yes, sometimes miracles do come in those big, undeniable ways, but more often than not, miracles are not loud. They don't arrive with fanfare or attention. Sometimes miracles are silent. They show up quietly, slipping into your life when you least expect it, like the weight on your chest lifting one morning after weeks of anxiety, like a stranger showing you kindness on a day you really needed it. Like a delayed flight that kept you from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. These aren't coincidences. These are the quiet fingerprints of a God who's always working behind the scenes. The thing is, we live in a world obsessed with spectacle. If something isn't trending, if it's not visible or validated by others, we question its value, and we bring that mindset into our spirituality. We start expecting God to prove Himself in ways that are big and obvious. And when that doesn't happen, we wonder if He's even there. But here's the truth. Just because a miracle doesn't shake the earth doesn't mean it's not shaking something inside of you. Just because the world doesn't see it doesn't mean it isn't sacred. I've experienced miracles that no one clapped for. No headlines were written, but they changed me from the inside out, a healing of my mind after a long season of fear, the return of joy after deep loss, the quiet reassurance during a lonely night that I wasn't alone. These weren't miracles you could photograph or post about, but they were real and they were holy. Miracles often happen in moments we overlook. Like the time you were about to give up, but some whisper inside, told you to hold on one more day. That was a miracle. The job you didn't get, only to realize months later that it would have led you down the wrong path. That was protection, which is a miracle in disguise. Sometimes the delay is the miracle. Sometimes the closed door is the miracle. We're just too focused on what we think we want to recognize what we actually need. We must learn to pay attention, to slow down, to notice the divine in the ordinary. Because God doesn't always shout, He often whispers, He moves in subtle shifts, a conversation that sparks healing, a song that speaks right to your spirit, a dream that gives you the courage to keep going. These things don't grab headlines, but they transform hearts, and let's not forget, some of the greatest miracles aren't about changing our circumstances, they're about changing us, a heart softened, a grudge released, a habit broken, a soul finally at peace. These are miracles of the deepest kind because they don't just change a moment, they change a life. So if you've been waiting for a big sign, for the sky to part or for lightning to strike, take a breath. Look around, you might already be standing in the middle of the miracle. You just haven't recognized it because it wasn't loud. Faith invites us to tune our ears to a different frequency, to believe that even in the quiet, God is speaking. Even in the stillness, He is working, and even when it looks like nothing is happening, something sacred is growing. Don't miss the silent miracles. They are often the ones that shape us the most. There's something deeply powerful that happens when you stop trying to control every detail of your life and instead surrender, not in weakness, not in giving up, but in choosing to release the grip you've been holding so tightly and saying, I trust that there's something greater than me at work here. That's when purpose begins to rise. That's when clarity starts to come, not from striving, but from stillness. Because true purpose doesn't come from forcing your way forward. It flows from surrender. We live in a culture that constantly pushes us to hustle, to have a plan, to know exactly who we are and what we're meant to do by a certain age. We're told to chase titles, recognition, status, as if purpose is something external, something we can build or earn. But what if it's not? What if purpose isn't something you chase, but something you uncover when you let go? I've learned that the moments in my life where I've felt most aligned, where I've been exactly where I was meant to be, have always followed moments of surrender. It was never when I had everything figured out. In fact, it was often when I had no answers at all, when I was lost, uncertain, even broken. But in those moments, when I finally stopped trying to fix everything by myself and simply said, God, show me what's next, something shifted. The doors I had been pounding on began to open on their own. The people I needed showed up. The clarity I was desperate for began to come, little by little, step by step. Surrender doesn't mean sitting back and doing nothing. It doesn't mean being passive or careless. Surrender means showing up fully, doing your part, and then releasing the outcome. It means saying, I will give my best, but I will not carry what isn't mine to carry. That shift in mindset can change everything, because it removes the pressure of perfection. It gives you space to breathe, to grow, to listen. When you surrender, you begin to see that your value doesn't come from what you produce, it comes from who you are. You stop living for applause and start living with intention. You stop asking, what do people expect from me? And start asking, what was I created to do? And slowly your path becomes clearer. Not because you planned every step, but because you followed peace. Because you let go of your timeline and trusted the process. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is get out of your own way. We often block our purpose with fear, with pride, with the belief that we have to be in control at all times. But control is exhausting. It limits you. It keeps you stuck in cycles of anxiety and overthinking. Surrender, on the other hand, opens you up. It allows grace to move in. It creates room for miracles you didn't even know to pray for. And here's the beautiful part. When you surrender, you don't lose yourself. You find yourself. You begin to discover passions you never paid attention to before. You begin to see how even the painful parts of your story were preparing you for something greater. Your purpose starts to become less about making it, and more about serving, loving, building, healing, whatever it is you're uniquely meant to do. So if you feel stuck, if you're exhausted from trying to figure it all out, maybe it's time to stop striving and start surrendering. Say, God, I don't know the full picture, but I trust you do. Lead me. And then take one step at a time. Purpose isn't a destination. It's a journey, one that flows not from your plans, but from your surrender. Prayer is one of the most powerful tools we have, and yet it's also one of the most underestimated. It's often seen as a last resort, something we turn to only when everything else has failed. But what if prayer was never meant to be the backup plan? What if it was meant to be the foundation? What if it's not just something we do in crisis, but something that strengthens us daily, shapes our thoughts, centers our hearts, and connects us to the source of everything good? Prayer doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't require fancy words, memorized verses, or a perfect setting. You don't need to be in a church or on your knees to speak to God. You can pray in your car. You can pray in your kitchen. You can pray in silence, because prayer is not about formality. It's about relationship. It's about opening your heart and letting God into the raw, unfiltered parts of your life. I've had moments in my life where everything felt chaotic, where nothing was going the way I hoped, and I didn't have the strength to pretend I was okay. In those moments, prayer wasn't a performance. It was a lifeline. Sometimes all I could say was, "God, help me." And those 3 words were enough, because prayer isn't about eloquence. It's about honesty. It's about being real. It's where you come as you are, not as who you think you should be. There is power in simply talking to God, power in expressing your fears, your dreams, your confusion, and your gratitude, power in pausing your day, even for a minute, to realign your spirit. That's what daily prayer does. It doesn't always change the situation, but it changes you in the situation. It calms your mind, sharpens your focus, softens your heart, and reminds you that you're not walking alone. Some people treat prayer like a vending machine, ask and wait for the result. And yes, sometimes God answers in obvious, beautiful, immediate ways. But often, the power of prayer is in the process, not just the outcome. When you pray consistently, you begin to see your heart change, your perspective shifts, you begin to want different things, not just for yourself, but for others. You begin to trust more and fear less. You start to walk through life with a kind of quiet confidence, because you know that even if things don't go your way, you've already surrendered them to someone who sees the bigger picture. Prayer is powerful because it connects you to divine wisdom. It reminds you that you don't have to carry the weight of the world alone. It's where you let go of what you can't control and make space for peace, for answers, for guidance. When you pray daily, you begin to develop spiritual muscle. It becomes your first response instead of your last resort, and over time you'll see things start to shift, not always immediately, not always dramatically, but consistently, quietly, faithfully. Sometimes the answer to your prayer is strength for the day. Sometimes it's a new idea, a closed door, an unexpected opportunity, or the courage to keep going. And sometimes the answer is simply peace in the middle of a storm, that deep knowing that even when nothing looks certain, you're still held, still guided, still loved. So don't wait for disaster to pray. Don't reserve it for emergencies. Use it daily. Speak to God like you would a trusted friend. Include Him in your decisions, your hopes, your disappointments. Let prayer be the rhythm of your life, not because you're religious, but because you understand its power. Prayer won't always change your circumstances overnight, but it will always change your heart, and that change is where the real miracles begin. We often talk about wanting miracles in our lives, breakthroughs, blessings, divine interventions that change everything in an instant, and yes, miracles are real, they happen every day. But there's something important we don't talk about enough. Miracles follow obedience, not convenience. They're not triggered by how easy the path is or how comfortable we are. They're unlocked when we say yes to what's right, even when it's hard. When we trust and obey, even when it doesn't make sense. Obedience doesn't mean blind submission. It means choosing to align your steps with God's direction, even when your feelings and fears tell you to do the opposite. It's not always convenient. In fact, most of the time it's not. It often asks you to step outside your comfort zone, to say no to something tempting, or to walk away from something that feels secure. But that's exactly where God shows up, not in the easy choices, but in the faithful ones. Think about the stories we know of people who saw God do the impossible. Almost every miracle in Scripture followed someone's act of obedience. Noah building an ark before it had ever rained, Abraham leaving everything familiar to go where God called, Moses standing before Pharaoh when he didn't feel qualified, Mary saying yes to carrying Jesus, knowing the cost. None of those acts were convenient. They were costly, risky, even dangerous, but they unlocked purpose, they brought heaven to earth, and they remind us that the road to miracles is often paved with obedience. In our lives today, it's no different. Maybe your miracle is on the other side of a difficult decision. Maybe it's waiting beyond the fear you've been carrying. Maybe God is asking you to forgive, to let go, to start over, to take a step in a direction that scares you. And you're hesitating, not because you don't believe, but because it's uncomfortable. It's not convenient, but here's the truth. Comfort never produces growth, and convenience rarely leads to transformation. Obedience does. We want God to move, but are we willing to move with Him? Are we willing to let go of our timeline, our expectations, our control? Obedience requires faith. It requires trust in the unseen, belief in the promises, and courage to walk even when the destination isn't clear. But when you take that step, when you choose obedience over ease, you position yourself for the miraculous. And obedience doesn't always mean some big, dramatic act. Sometimes it's in the small, consistent choices. Waking up early to pray, staying quiet when you want to fight back, showing up when no one notices, giving when it's a stretch, saying yes when you'd rather say no. All of these small acts are seeds. And when sown in faith, they produce a harvest far beyond what you can imagine. Obedience invites God into the ordinary moments. It says, I may not understand, but I'll trust you anyway. And that kind of heart is what He responds to. That's the kind of faith that unlocks doors you didn't even know existed. So if you're waiting for a miracle, ask yourself, have I been obedient, not perfect, but willing, not flawless, but faithful? Have I said yes to what God's been nudging me toward, even when it didn't make sense? Because often, it's not that God isn't speaking. It's that we're waiting for the instructions to feel easy before we move. But the miracle doesn't come after the convenience. It comes after the obedience, after the step of faith. After the surrender, that's where transformation happens. That's where heaven meets earth. That's where the impossible becomes possible. And when you look back, you'll realize it wasn't just about the miracle. It was about the journey that shaped you, the faith that grew in you, and the relationship that deepened through every single yes.